Hello, everyone. My name is Stephen Palacini, and I'm a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. And I'm doing this video today I was really inspired by a group that I've joined uh, of newcomers to Canada that are on post-graduation work permits that will be expiring, that were promised a TR to PR pathway in 2022, which hasn't happened. Were promised extensions on their PGWPs and have not gotten any correspondence from IRCC, and was inspired then by being part of this group to let them know what can be done when your PGWP is expiring. You have no other option to extend your worker status in Canada but to have a basis to extend it on, and that's in many cases an LMIA. So this video is going to be reserved for just basic LMIA training, specifically for someone who is in Canada on an open work permit, somebody who is in Canada working right now, and what kind of verbiage can they use with their employer to get an LMIA? Because for many people it seems daunting. It's hard to get an LMIA. There's a lot of things that are required. In reality, it's not hard, it's just tedious. So that's why I want to show you guys everything here and what I've thought about LMIAs for some time and what I know about LMIAs and how you can pitch it to your employer, right? So an LMIA counts for 50 points of arranged employment. That's usually good to add those points in express entry, or can trigger a provincial nomination in many cases. And you may also know that LMIA stands for Labor Market Impact Assessment. Okay, so it is a document, it is an analysis that is issued. This makes it sound so scary and so challenging, but it's a document, it's an analysis that is issued by Service Canada, also known as ESDC. Here it is, Employment and Social Development Canada. Okay, and I would say 98% of the time, to get a work permit, you'll need to get an LMIA. There are, international mobility program. There are, religious and charitable considerations at times, but for the most part, you'll need to get the employer will need to get an LMIA to hire a foreign worker that doesn't have an already existing open work permit. Okay. LMIA stands for Labor Market Impact Assessment. It's something that Employment and Social Development performs. The main purpose of it is to show and to protect the Canadian labor market, to show that this job that is offered to the foreign national isn't going to compete with Canadians or PRs, so they're not going to be harming the Canadian job market. That's the complex way to look at it. Easy way is an LMIA is just your employer sponsoring you for a job. And that's what I would encourage everybody to call it. When they're speaking to their employer, let's say you've been working with your employer for 6 months. What would you say? Say, I've been working here for 6 months. I think you should know that in 4 to 5 months, my status is going to expire. I'm not going to be able to continue to work for your company. So what I'm going to need from you is I'm going to need a sponsorship. I'm going to need sponsorship from your company. And your employer's going to say, well, what does that entail? Okay, so let's ask the 5 questions, the W's. Who, what, why, where, when, how? What's it going to involve? It's a $1,000 government fee for the LMIA to apply for it, and an employer can do it without a third-party representative. They don't need a consultant or a lawyer to do it. Consultants and lawyers will tell you it's very challenging. I disagree. It's not challenging, it's rather tedious. It's tedious, there's a lot of little things, which is why I want to show you kind of where those little things are. And I want to prove my point so that you can prove to your employer it's actually not challenging, it's just tedious. So an LMIA, which stands for Labor Market Impact Assessment, is going to, these are the lists that are produced of positive and negative LMIAs in Q3 of 2023, okay? So I already did the additions on it. So temporary foreign worker program 2022 Q3 positive. This is just to show you guys there were approved LMIAs and approved positions, okay? I don't have the exact numbers anymore, but roughly in Q3 of 2022, just to give you some hope, 17,000 LMIA positions were approved and 14,000 roughly LMIAs were approved, okay? Difference is a position is, an LMIA can have 2 or 3 positions on it. So in essence, around 14,000 employers in a quarter got LMIAs approved and 17,000 LMIAs were approved. Now, they also show which ones were not approved. And of this, I've done the math on it, something like 980 or 985 positions were not approved, 360 some odd LMIA applications were not approved. So I compare 365 to 14,000, okay, and you'll see that your odds of getting an LMIA approved are greater than 95%. As an employer, or even getting a position approved is greater than 95%. So they are not necessarily challenging. Of course, the $1,000 fee does scare some employers away. If your employer is scared of a $1,000 fee to keep you on, I think you should be reconsidering your relationship with that employer. So these are the two spreadsheets that ideally will give you some hope that in a quarter, 14,000 employers were approved for an LMIA. And which gets you thinking, how many employers are there in Canada? There must be at least 1 million. I know I've done the market research myself. There's something like 50,000 just dental offices alone in Canada. So there's at least more than 1 million employers and 1 million small businesses. And to think that only 14,000 a quarter are taking advantage of the temporary foreign worker program will tell you that maybe a blue ocean strategy wouldn't be looking at the list of who has approved LMIAs, but considering if your employer has never heard of LMIA or has never done an LMIA, maybe the employer can be convinced to do one for you, to sponsor you. Okay, so that should give you some insight there. There's a very low refusal rate for LMIAs. Service Canada ESDC is a very amicable, nice department to deal with. You as the applicant would not be dealing with Service Canada. It would be the employer or the employer's representative, like an immigration consultant or a lawyer. But they have their names in their email, they have their phone number, they call the employer to verify. It's a lot different than IRCC, to tell you the truth. So that is some hope that not a lot of employers do take advantage of the temporary foreign worker program. And the ones that do, they probably already have their LMIAs and their positions lined up and their recruiting agents that they're working with. So it's possible to convince your employer to sponsor you because there's a 95% approval rate of LMIAs. Okay, there's a lot of employers that aren't doing LMIAs and can learn about LMIAs. The fee is only $1,000. And now you're probably wondering, why am I looking at marketing coordinator in Windsor Sarnia? Well, because I've done a few takes of this video and I want to make sure that it's good. So there's some hope. You can convince your employer to sponsor you. Then what's your employer going to say? Well, what's it going to cost? You've told them what it's going to cost. How much time is it going to take? Well, there's an advertising period, which is 28 days. And then you submit the application and then the processing times are listed. We can just search for them, but they are listed. So LMIA processing times, and they're right here. Now, how long is it going to take? You say, well, it's 28 days of advertising, and then I'm not going to do global talent stream. That's a very different type of LMIA. I'm right now just talking about permanent residents, high wage and low wage. In any case, 1 to 2 months roughly to get an approval. And they have an online application process that your employer can use. It makes it very easy. So what other things is the employer going to need to provide to sponsor you for that job? Well, simply it is 4 things. It is 4 things. Proof of recruitment and advertisement. Like you've advertised for the position, you've tried to recruit Canadians or permanent residents. That's to show that the employer's made an effort to try and recruit Canadians, offer the position first to Canadians or PRs before offering you, the foreign national, that position. And the recruitment, I'll go into the recruitment just a little bit. There are some specific requirements that you'll have to look at and know. But other than that, that's the main overarching, I would say, point one. Point two is the LMIA application form, which I have here to show you what it looks like. And this is a low wage stream one because there's the high wage stream and there's the low wage stream, which will depend on the rate of pay that your employer is giving you. So a lot of this information on the form is the business information, the employer contact information, third-party representative if they use one. How many TFWs does he have currently hired? Will it result in direct job creation? This is where they're assessing the labor market factors, you know? And if you're not supervising anybody, you may not be transferring skills like to people that you're managing because you're not managing anybody, but you're filling a labor shortage. So there's different labor market impacts and they're all weighed differently. And they're going to interview the employer after receiving this complete application. And I wouldn't say the way the employer answers this will torpedo the application unless obviously it says certain things like, have you been banned from using the TFW program for worker abuse? And they select yes. Well, okay, they're probably going to do an investigation and figure out what's going on. But for the most part, it's pretty straightforward, and any on-the-ball business owner would be able to answer this. Low wage stream requires a cap calculation. I'm not going to go into detail on that here. I have a full detailed video on that coming. So let's reiterate. Let's go back to the basics. You're going to need to the employer's going to need to do some advertising. Okay. One of those advertisements for sure is going to have to be on Canada's Job Bank. To get an employer account on Canada's Job Bank, you need a payroll number. If you're paying employees payroll, you have a payroll number. It ends in RP0001, okay? They can sign up for a job bank account in less than 5 minutes. They can also delegate access of their job bank account to an authorized third party like an immigration consultant or a lawyer, okay? They need to run an ad on the job bank in the NOC code that you're in and a description of the job, right? And of course, it has to meet all the provincial labor code requirements. You can't offer somebody less than, I think, 2 weeks of vacation or 3 weeks, whatever the requirement is, let's say in Ontario. So then what else would they ask? Well, what else do I need? I need to do the recruitment and advertising. I need to do the form. And what else? Oh, you need to submit basically at a minimum 2 documents. One that shows you're in business, doing what you say you're doing, like you're a restaurant, so providing a good or service, and another document that shows you can afford to hire the foreign workers. So the business is making enough money to be able to afford the LMIA, the hourly rate that you have in the LMIA for the person you want to hire. So how are those, what type of documents are those 2 things? Those fall under what's called business legitimacy, okay? And you can find business legitimacy, or your employer can find business legitimacy under, let's just go into the stream for low wage and program requirements. It should be business legitimacy. So like I said, one that shows you've got the ability to fulfill the terms of the job offer. You've got the money, you've got the income coming in the business. T2 schedule, that's a tax statement, or payroll records for a minimum of 6 weeks showing that they can. And now if your employer is not comfortable giving any of those CRA documents to a third-party representative or to Service Canada, they can get what's called an attestation letter, okay, from their accountant. And basically the attestation letter just says, I confirm that this business can hire John at $16.50 an hour for 30 hours a week, because an LMIA needs to be at least a minimum of 30 hours a week, offer full-time job for a minimum of 1 year, and at that wage, and the accountant verifies that. So that can be taken off with an attestation. That can be T2 Schedule 100 balance sheet and T125. That's, the corporate tax return. And sometimes the Service Canada officer may ask for more information when they're reviewing the application. And then providing a gooder service. So how do they know that you're in the restaurant business? Because you're hiring, let's say, a food service supervisor, right? What would obviously happen in job fraud might be somebody running a t-shirt printing company, but they want to hire their brother that's a barber. And so the only way his brother's work permit's going to get approved is if he's hiring a barber, because his brother has experience as a barber. Now, clearly the business doesn't have an employment need. A restaurant doesn't need to hire somebody who can cut hair, right? So they look at proof of providing a good or service, and that could be checked off with the municipal business license, just City of London, Ontario, restaurant and food service business, right? So those are basically the 4 things you can tell your employer he'll need to show that you've advertised for the position and done adequate recruitment. And there are a lot of specific tedious things that you have to do with recruitment, that you have the form completed and you have those 2 documents that substantiate business legitimacy. One that shows what you do, the business that you're in, like one of these that they list on this link, okay? Not any other type of document. And then that's it. Not only is it, there's a good chance that you'll get an LMIA approved, over 95% chance approval rate. It's not being utilized by the vast majority of businesses in Canada. And your job in convincing the employer, another thing you can mention is not only that there's a 95% chance of approval. The other thing you'd also want to mention is that they're going to need to do that if they want to keep you working for them. So if you have a good relationship with your employer and you've been working with them for some time, then you're going to be able to have that leverage and say, if you help sponsor me for this LMIA, which will assist me in staying in Canada, continuing to work for you, and allow me to apply for my PR, I'm going to be stuck working with you for 2 years. If I can tell you anything right now that the labor market is suffering from, it's a very high turnover and a low labor participation rate. So if you're able to continue to work with that employer and not turn over, they're going to be really happy. So I hope that's a pretty good overview of those, you can answer those questions your employer may have. I will dive into the wages, that's important, and median, and briefly just like the different streams. So there's an LMIA, a high wage LMIA, a low wage LMIA, and then there's also a PR support LMIA. But the PR support LMIA will also, depending on the wage, either fall under high wage LMIA advertising requirements or low wage LMIA advertising requirements. And like I said, the recruitment and advertising isn't hard, it's just tedious. So for example, on a low wage LMIA, what does that mean, low wage? A low wage LMIA is one that is, these are the median hourly wages by province or territory, okay? So if your employer is offering you less than, you're in Alberta, let's say, and he's offering you less than $28.85 per hour, if it's a salaried position, you need to calculate what the hourly rate would be. If he's offering you less than that amount, then he's going to have to do the low wage advertising and recruitment stream requirements and the basically the low wage LMIA requirements. If he's above that, he'll have to do the high wage requirements. Okay. And same thing goes for all the provinces. This is where the median hourly wage rates are. There's also, they're going to have to pay you, offer you a job, okay, that the median wage rate is in line with what your the median wage rate for your occupation. So I like to go to trend analysis wages. And that's why I was looking at marketing coordinator. So let's do business development coordinator. Will they have it? Coordinator. Okay, let's say you're a business development coordinator. Your knock is 41402, and you need your employer to hire you, and you're living in Fredericton. They need to pay you, they need to offer you $34.36 an hour. Okay. If you're in London, Ontario, for business development, they're going to have to hire you $39.42 an hour, right? So let's say you're a food service supervisor. That's a skilled position. And you see the median wages are much lower for food service supervisor. And you wonder, okay, why do they have this requirement? Why does a foreign worker need to be offered at least the median wage rate? Well, it's because it wouldn't be very good for the Canadian labor market if foreign workers were paid less than Canadians or PRs, right? So that's why it's like, if you're going to hire a foreign worker, you have to pay them at least the median rate amongst those professions that Canadians and PRs get. That's why the median, they need to at least offer you this at 30 hours a week, okay, for a food service supervisor. And because these change every year, it's important to check this obviously before you're submitting and the LMIA advertisement, or sorry, the LMIA application. And as you can imagine, prior to starting when you start the advertising, you're going to need to put the wage rate in the advertising. So, and then that's going to advertise for a period of 28 days. And then you're going to have two other forms of advertising. And those vary depending on the stream, high wage or low wage. Think about it this way logically. Low wage stream is under the median rate that the province, the median hourly rate of the province. So the lower end of, let's say, the socioeconomic scale. What they're going to want to encourage is that those low wage jobs are advertised to underrepresented groups, okay? Which is why for the low wage LMIA stream, they have slightly different recruitment and advertising requirements than high wage. Think about it. A high wage is above the median. They're a very good applicant. So that's why they do high wage LMIAs for 3 years. Low wage, only 2-year work permit. High wage can be up to 3 years. High wage, they also want a transition plan. They want to see how can that person that you're giving the high wage LMIA to transition to permanent residence. It's part of the form, and it's not too complicated. So proof of recruitment. What do they require for recruitment? So there's the transition plan, okay? And there's obviously an exemption for transition plan when it's the PR LMIA, but I can explain that. So the recruitment, this is kind of interesting. So at least 2 additional methods of recruitment, like the job bank, and then 2 more that target the appropriate education skill level. One of the methods must be national in scope. So, and easily accessed by residents of any province or territory. Because it's a high wage LMIA, think about it. It's over $26, $28 an hour. It's a pretty good job. And if an employer was like, yeah, I advertised it on the local job board for Grand Prairie and Fort Nelson. Well, no, you want to advertise it on Indeed or on a Monster because you want to be able to target the entire country, right? You want to show that you've done that advertisement. Whereas on the low wage LMIA stream, they really emphasize 2 forms of advertisement, 2 additional, and targeting underrepresented groups because these are low wage positions. So they're entry level. Target them to groups that are underrepresented in the labor force, like newcomers, youth, Indigenous, people with disabilities. So those advertising portals, obviously consultants and lawyers are very familiar with them, like Indigenous jobs and newcomer jobs, okay? But back to the form, the employer will have to do this, and we've got I want to show you guys the checklist as well. That shows that it's complete application. So As I promised, labor market assessment application form. This can be done online through LMIA online. Your employer can get an LMIA online account once they get a job bank account. And I would recommend they do LMIA online because it's a lot quicker. You can easily add a third-party representative to your account as well. Documentation supporting business legitimacy. I explained that. That's the business license or the attestation letter, and potentially tax documents and payroll. Copy of bargaining agreement. This is in the event that your employer is unioned. So then you would need to have a copy of the collective bargaining agreement and show the wages there. But very few companies are unioned in Canada, especially few companies that are hiring foreign workers, I would say. Proof of recruitment. This is where you got to show the job recruitment and advertisement and other recruitment activities, proof of job bank advertisement, and proof of additional method of recruitment. So this is where you've got to be really, I guess, like I said, it's not challenging, and they don't want to impede the growth of Canadian business, right? They don't want to impede on businesses, but they want to just make sure that the business has done their due diligence. They're paying the foreign worker the right wage. That's why you've got to look at what the median rate is for your occupation in your specific region of the province. So when your employer says, well, what do I have to pay you? You say, this is the median rate. This is what you have to pay me, and you need to pay it for a minimum of 30 hours a week, right? And you can always pay you more than that after the fact. So that's pretty much it. I wanted to show you guys, this is program requirements for high wage positions. So the first thing to do would be determine, are you going to be a high wage or a low wage or a global talent stream? But that's for another video. Are you going to be a high wage or a low wage? And then you can go through the requirements for high wage positions. And you're like, okay, I remember, Steve mentioned business legitimacy, the transition plan for high wage, because there's such a high income earner that they want you to stay in the country. Recruitment and advertisement, wages, job duties and working conditions, health insurance. These are all mostly, they tell you what, basically you can't treat a TFW differently than a PR or a Canadian citizen. You guys, temporary foreign workers, have the same rights as Canadian citizens and permanent residents. They need to be, have the same insurance and benefits and protection. So that's all listed here. And in recruitment and advertisement, they outline specifically what you need to do, right? Like I said, it's tedious, but it's not impossible. And how you must pay the prevailing wage, which I showed you guys, which is the median wage on Job Bank. To determine, you can compare, you find the NOC code. Everything is pretty much laid out here. So how can you pitch it to your employer? You say, the one advantage you'll have over giving somebody an LMIA and hiring them on a closed work permit is that they have an occupation-specific, location-specific, employer-specific work permit. So you would say, there's no way I'm going to turn over. You're going to have a good worker that's going to work with that employer for some time. Versus a Canadian or PR who can just leave at the drop of a hat and take another job. And in a job market where it's a workers market right now, and employers are suffering with labor shortage, turnover, and I would say low labor participation rate, this is very interesting to a lot of employers. And they need to know that it's not a ton of information. Yes, it is a bit of a lengthy process. It is tedious, but 95% get approved. And it's doing something good to help keep you in the country and extend your work permit, and you can continue working for that employer. So I hope this was a good quick summary of the LMIA process. Basically for high wage and then for low wage. I talked about recruitment. I talked about the wages. I talked about the business legitimacy documents, that the company has to be real. And I think then the only other thing I could mention would be the PR support LMIA, which is essentially, it's still an LMIA. It has either a high wage or a low wage, okay, stream. If it's If they're offering you PR support for higher than the median wage, it would fall under high wage advertising. If they're offering you PR support under the median wage, it would be PR, but under the low wage advertising and recruitment requirements without the transition plan. And PR support LMIAs must be skilled positions. They cannot be for, in the old case, knock C and D or tier 4 and 5, right? So it has to be tier 0, 1, 2, 3. Another requirement of a PR support LMIA is the company has to be an establishment for at least 1 year. It has to have been operational for 1 year to be able to offer a PR support LMIA. And then the final unique difference about a PR support LMIA would be the fact that the foreign worker must be named on the LMIA when you submit the LMIA. So a high wage and a low wage, those are streams as well. But to just backtrack for a second here, the LMIA is a document that's owned by the employer that they get from Service Canada. It really doesn't have anything to do so much with the applicant. In fact, on like the applicant, I'm talking about the immigrant or the foreign national. So in the case of a low wage LMIA, this is where you put the worker name, first name, last name, date of birth, country of residence. That is it. So you can see it's a lot. It really is an employer's document. A PR support LMIA has, you can't get it unnamed. So let's say you had a food service supervisor position. You needed to fill this position in your business and you couldn't find a Canadian or PR to do it, but you hadn't found the foreign worker yet. You could submit it without this information, okay? And then you could get what's called an unnamed LMIA, an unnamed high wage, or an unnamed low wage LMIA, okay? You cannot do that for a PR support LMIA. A PR support LMIA, you have to have identified the candidate prior and say, I want to sponsor them for a work permit. I want to sponsor them for their permanent residence. And this is their name. And therefore, there's one more additional requirement for a PR support LMIA, and that is a job offer. So the employer needs to do a written job offer, which is, we'd like to offer you a position for this, and it has to be for at least 1 year. So that's the gist of it. Keep your head up. It's, I think the best approach is to work with an employer, get to know the employer, trust the employer. So I hope this video was helpful, and have a good one.